You know, in the world of healthcare, there are giants, and then there's United Health Group. This is a company that's not just a big player, it's practically part of the foundation of the American healthcare system. It's also a company that a federal judge once called immoral. Now, how can both of those things possibly be true? Well, that's the story we're digging into today. The two very different faces of a healthcare titan. And this whole story of two faces just played out perfectly, right in front of our eyes. Get this. After a total nightmare of a year where its stock got hammered, down 34%, United Health suddenly roared back to life. On a single day in April, the stock leaped over 9%. What in the world caused that kind of whiplash? How did a giant that so many people thought was stumbling stage such an incredible comeback? Let's break it all down.
All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll unpack that surprising comeback. Then, we'll dive deep into the profit machine that makes this whole thing run. After that, we're going to look that history of controversy right in the eye, ask if this company is really as indispensable as it seems, and then wrap it all up with 3 possible futures for this healthcare giant. So let's start right there with that wild comeback. After that 34% plunge, Wall Street was basically holding its breath. The company had just reported its first earnings miss in over a decade. The pressure was seriously on. And then, the first quarter numbers for 2026 dropped, and they were a genuine shock to the system.
And this right here is why Wall Street was so stunned. Just look at these numbers. The analysts, they were expecting revenue around $110 billion. United Health comes in and delivers almost $112 billion. They were forecasting earnings per share around $6.57. The company just blew past that with $7.23. But the real surprise, the thing that really got everyone's attention, was the guidance. They basically told investors, you think this is good? We're going to do even better for the rest of the year. Now that is the kind of signal that sparks a massive rally.
So, how did they pull this off? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a classic full-on corporate overhaul. First, they fixed their pricing. They had to adjust their insurance plans to actually match the real cost of care, which was a huge mistake they'd made the year before. Then, they refocused. They sold off their international businesses to concentrate entirely on the massive US market. They also poured a ton of money into technology and AI to get more efficient. And finally, they cleaned house, bringing in new leadership and replacing nearly half of their top executives. It was a textbook turnaround, and they executed it pretty much flawlessly.
That comeback is impressive, for sure, but it's really just a symptom of a much bigger story. To really understand United Health, you gotta pop the hood and look at its core business. It's an absolute profit machine, built on 2 powerful, interlocking engines.
Okay, so on one side, you've got the business that everybody knows, United Healthcare. It's the insurance giant covering over 50 million Americans. But the real magic, the secret weapon, is Optum. You should think of Optum as the brain of the whole operation. It manages pharmacy benefits, it runs clinics, and it crunches just massive amounts of data. And this is where the synergy happens. United Healthcare feeds Optum this enormous pool of patients and data, and Optum uses that data to streamline everything and cut costs. It's an incredibly powerful feedback loop.
And what's the result of that synergy? Well, this slide says it all. Absolute dominance. United Health isn't just the biggest health insurer out there. At a market cap of over $300 billion, it's bigger than its next 4 largest competitors combined. Just let that sink in for a second. That is a level of market power you just do not see in most industries.
In that market dominance, it translates directly into financial firepower. The company generated $16 billion in free cash flow last year. And yep, just like its market cap, that's more cash than those same 4 competitors generated combined. This is not just some number on a spreadsheet. This is the money they use to buy up smaller companies, to invest in cutting-edge tech, and to basically outspend anyone who even tries to challenge them.
So we've seen the powerful, profitable face of United Health. But remember, we said this titan has 2 faces. And now we need to turn to the other one, the one that's defined by a long and pretty troubling history of controversy.
You really don't have to dig very deep to find this side of the story. This quote here, it sums it up perfectly. This isn't about 1 or 2 mistakes over the years. We're talking about a documented pattern of numerous investigations, lawsuits, and fines for a whole range of issues, from financial schemes all the way to how they treat their patients' claims.
And this timeline shows just how persistent this has all been. This is not a recent problem. We're talking about major issues that stretch back for years and years. In 2009, a $350 million settlement for a, quote, fraudulent reimbursement scheme. You fast forward to 2019, and a federal judge described their denial of mental health care as immoral. And today, right now, they are still facing investigations into their Medicare billing practices. It's a relentless, recurring pattern.
So this brings us to the core dilemma of United Health. I mean, how do you reconcile these two completely different faces? On one side, you have this almost monopolistic strength, and on the other, a critical, recurring weakness that always seems to be bubbling just beneath the surface.
Let's talk about their defenses for a second. What investors call an economic moat. This is what makes it so incredibly hard for competitors to challenge them. We've talked about their unmatched scale, their integrated model of insurance and data, and their financial power. But there's also this, the Buffett stamp. When a legendary investor like Warren Buffett buys a stock, especially when it's down, it sends this powerful signal to the rest of the market that the company's long-term strengths are very, very real.
But every castle has a weakness, right? And United Health's is a big one. Constant legal and regulatory risk. And here's the paradox. The very things that make them so powerful, their aggressive cost-cutting, their massive data operation, their sheer dominance, are the exact same things that put them directly in the crosshairs of regulators and lawyers. Their greatest strength is also their greatest vulnerability.
So what's the company's answer to this whole dilemma? Well, according to their CEO, it's all about technology and focus. They are betting big on AI and doubling down on the US market. The strategy seems to be, if we can become so efficient, so technologically advanced, and so essential to the system, maybe all those regulatory headaches will just become another cost of doing business.
Okay, so where does all this leave us? Let's game out 3 possible scenarios for how this battle between United Health's two faces could actually play out from here.
First up, you've got the bull case. In this version of the future, that big bet on AI and technology really pays off. They become even more efficient, profits grow, and they manage to navigate the legal challenges more effectively. In that scenario, the stock outperforms. Then there's the base case, which is basically more of the same. The profit machine keeps running, but they keep getting hit with big fines and lawsuits. The stock probably performs in line with the market, but it's always capped by that persistent risk. And finally, you've got the bear case. This is where that fatal flaw becomes truly fatal. A massive lawsuit or some sweeping new regulation fundamentally damages their business, and the stock takes a major hit.
So we end right where we began, with a fundamental question. Is United Health Group an indispensable pillar of American healthcare, a giant whose efficiency and scale we just can't do without? Or is it a company whose success is built on a foundation of pushing boundaries, always just one major lawsuit away from a crisis? The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. But understanding that central conflict, well, that's the key to understanding this titan of healthcare.